You know, the next time you buy pretty much anything in Europe, a coffee, a couch, maybe even a new pair of shoes, you're going to be part of this quiet but massive revolution. The EU is rolling out a whole new Green Rulebook, and it's set to change everything about how products are made, sold, and even thrown away. So let's break down what this actually means for all of us. It's a question we've all asked ourselves, right? You see labels like eco-friendly, natural, green, and after a while they start to feel almost meaningless. Well, the EU is stepping in with a pretty radical idea, a single, comprehensive set of rules to cut through all that greenwashing and force companies to actually prove their sustainable claims. To really get our heads around this, we're going to follow a product on its entire journey, all the way from the forest to the factory and way beyond. And at every single stage, we'll see how a specific EU rule acts as a kind of gatekeeper for sustainability. So let's start at the very beginning. Okay, our journey kicks off at the very source, the raw materials. This is where products now face their first major test, all thanks to a powerful new regulation that's aimed at protecting the world's forests. This is the EU Deforestation-Free Products Regulation, or EUDR for short, and it is a total game changer. The idea is really simple. If a product is linked to land that was deforested after the end of 2020, it cannot be sold in the EU. Period. It's a hard and fast rule. And this scope here is just huge. We're talking about 7 key commodities that are found in literally thousands of everyday products. So whether it's the rubber in your shoes, the chocolate bar you're eating, or the soy and animal feed, the EUDR applies. And here's where it gets truly radical. Companies can't just make a vague promise. They have to provide cold, hard proof. They have to trace their supply chain all the way back to the source and provide the exact GPS coordinates of the plat of land where that raw material was grown. This is a level of transparency we haven't seen before, and it's enforced by law. And you better believe the EU is backing this up with some serious financial muscle. Failing to comply isn't just a slap on the wrist. A company can be fined up to 4% of its entire annual turnover in the EU. Now, for major corporations, that's a number that makes compliance an absolute must. Okay, so our raw materials have passed the first test, but what about the product itself? The next stage, the design and manufacturing, is now governed by a whole new philosophy. Products have to be built to last, not just to be thrown away. This is the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products Regulation, or ESPR. You can kind of think of it as Eco-Design 2.0. The old rules really only looked at the energy efficiency of things like refrigerators and light bulbs. But the new ESPR, it expands that whole way of thinking to almost every physical product sold in the EU. The goal here is to tackle our throwaway culture head-on. Under the ESPR, products have to be designed from the get-go to last longer, be easier to repair, easier to upgrade, and eventually easier to recycle. It's a fundamental shift away from that linear take, make, waste model and towards a circular one. And to make all of this a reality, the ESPR introduces the digital product passport. Just imagine scanning a code on your new phone and instantly seeing where its materials came from, how to get it repaired, and what its environmental footprint is. This passport is going to give everyone, consumers, repair shops, recyclers, the info they need to keep products in use for as long as possible. Now, a huge part of designing a better product is being honest about its environmental impact. And this brings us to a massive problem the EU wants to solve: greenwashing. You know, when companies make these vague or misleading claims about how eco-friendly their products are. The EU's answer is something called the Product Environmental Footprint, or PEF. Think of it as a universal, science-based language for sustainability. It measures a product's full impact across its entire life cycle. And, this is key, it looks beyond just carbon to think about water use, pollution, biodiversity, and a whole lot more. So, from now on, if a company wants to claim its product is green, it has to show the receipts, and those receipts come in the form of a PEF assessment. So we've got sustainable materials and a sustainable design. But how do we make sure that the companies making these products are actually getting the investment they need? Well, let's follow the money trail. This is the EU taxonomy. At its core, it's a giant classification system. You could call it a green list for investors. It's designed to answer one simple question: what actually counts as a truly sustainable economic activity? The goal is to steer billions in private investment away from harmful activities and toward the ones that really help the environment. To get on this green list, a business activity has to make a substantial contribution to at least one of these 6 key environmental goals, things like mitigating climate change or promoting a circular economy. But that's only the first hurdle. And this is where the EU's holistic approach really shines. An activity also has to meet what's called the do no significant harm principle. So, for example, a wind farm that helps fight climate change can't be built if it destroys a vital ecosystem. It's a simple but incredibly powerful idea. You can't solve one environmental problem by creating another one. All right, we've sourced it, we've designed it, and we've financed it. But what happens when our product finally reaches the end of its life? Well, this final piece of the puzzle redefines the very concept of waste itself. The EU's Waste Framework Directive establishes this very clear waste hierarchy. And it's not just a suggestion, it is a legal priority order. The absolute best option is to prevent waste in the first place. If you can't prevent it, reuse it. If you can't reuse it, recycle it. Sending it to a landfill, that's the absolute last resort. So, how does the EU enforce this? Through a concept called Extended Producer Responsibility, or EPR. This totally flips the script. It makes the company that made the product financially responsible for what happens to it at the end of its life. This creates this brilliant feedback loop that pushes them to design products that are easier to reuse and recycle right from the very start. So we've walked through the entire life cycle. Let's just take one final step back and see how all of these different pieces connect to form one powerful, cohesive system. This table lays it all out perfectly. Each regulation we've talked about is a different link in the same chain. The EUDR protects the source. The ESPR and PEF govern how the product is created. The EU taxonomy funds the right businesses, and the Waste Directive closes the loop. It's a seamless journey from beginning to end. And that, right there, is the most important takeaway from this whole explainer. This is not just a collection of random laws. It is a single, integrated strategy. Each part reinforces the others to create a system where the default option for both businesses and consumers is the sustainable one. And this all leads to a final, fascinating question. As the world's largest single market, the EU isn't just making rules for itself, it's effectively setting a new global benchmark for what sustainable truly means. The ripple effects from this are going to be felt worldwide. So the only question left is, who's going to be next to follow?